Good evening, everybody. It is The Line After Dark. It is myself and Austin Archer tonight. This is the first time we've actually met. Hi, Austin. Nice to meet you.
Hey, how are you? I feel like I look kind of divinely inspired tonight, Seth. I've got like this really glowing light behind me. So it's going to be incumbent on the theists who call in to sort of talk down this person who's very clearly touched by the light of the divine.
No, I like that. This is funny. I'm going on a ghost hunt or a paranormal investigation. Next weekend, I'm going to Kansas, and there's a haunted hotel, it's a mansion, rather, allegedly haunted. And I enjoy ghost stories. Of course, I think it's all a bunch of bullshit, but I'm going to go in with an open mind, as a good skeptic should. And so I've been doing my research, and there have been a lot of conversations about auras. There's an aura. So maybe that's what that is. I don't think it's an orb. It's not round, but you do have a glow about you. So maybe, I could pull the psychic thing and say, is there someone in your life whose name starts with M who recently passed? Is it your spirit animal or something like that? You ever done anything along those lines? Have you ever gotten into conversations about ghosts and spirits and auras and orbs and that kind of thing?
Oh, sure, absolutely. I mean, certainly when I was growing up, and me and my friends loved telling ghost stories and trying to believe in things like that. It's fun to believe that there might be, a haunted hotel somewhere, or that someone might have a ghost that lives in their house, or I even had some kind of weird thing going on in my house when I was in college. It's always fun to explain things with the unexplainable, the supernatural, something like, oh, there's like an interdimensional being that's coming into my home and it's moving things around, and who knows why it's doing the things that it's doing, but I don't know. It's fun.
As we're setting things up here, the link and the phone number to dial in on the screen. Theists will get priority. So if you have an argument, a position, a question, you want to talk about God, the existence of a God, many gods, a higher power, I don't know, whatever, and you feel like it would make for a compelling conversation, we are genuinely interested. We really do want to hear it. We're not going to be jerks to you unless you're jerks to us. And that doesn't happen very often. Usually, we get some really good callers and others. It's funny how when you see the desire to believe, I've gone back to the ghost thing, but this can apply to anything. If you take someone who is already keyed up and they already think it's grandma, or they already think that the woman who died in the house 150 years ago, they've already got themselves kind of ramped up. Any creak of any hinge, any door closing in a room that's unexplained, they don't know if there's someone back there. Any temperature change, any weird phenomenon or supposed sense, is going to, for them, be agency. It's going to be that person. I find it's interesting psychologically. I'm not a psychologist, but how the brain works, our desire to believe. So often we're like, aha, that has to be X, Y, or Z. And so anyway, that I find it's interesting to see. Maybe, do we call it conditioned response? Did you call it something else, Austin?
I don't know. Probably. I think it's like I said, it's fun. I think it's a desire for it to be one thing over another. I think that when you want the answer to be a ghost, or you want the answer to be the spirit of the person who inhabited the house before you, it's very hard to be dissuaded against it. And I definitely think that you're right. Like any creak of a hinge or anything like that, like 90% of ghost hunting shows, those TV shows that are so popular, are just that. It's, somebody throwing a pebble down a hallway to make content, to make an interesting episode of the TV show. But also when people really want the answer to be, oh yeah, there is something supernatural happening here, they usually don't want to be disproven or have any evidence that suggests, oh no, it was probably just my mind playing tricks on me. It's like they are determined that, and I don't know if that's conditional response or if it's just the desire of someone who wants the world to be more mystical or unexplainable than it is. I don't know.
Probably doesn't have to be any one thing. It might be a combination of factors. Forgive me for not
Mhm.
knowing that much about you, Austin. Did you come from a belief background in some way?
Yeah, no problem. We are getting to know each other tonight. Yeah, I'm right now. I'm in Sandy, Utah, which is where I'm from, and I live in Los Angeles. But I'm in my parents' house in Sandy, Utah, and I was raised LDS Mormon. So I grew up in a very high demand religion with a very specific set of beliefs, idiosyncratic culture, and was a true believing member of that church till I was 18 years old. And kind of fell away in my 19th year. And here we are. It's been 18 years since then, and I'm still going strong, unfortunately, much to the chagrin of the Mormon faithful in my friends and family group. Actually, they're all cool with it, but by this point.
Did you have to petition the church to get your name off the rolls? I've had people had to write letters threatening litigation and then the guy I'm thinking of, he's like, I want off the church rolls. I don't want to be associated. And they wouldn't do it and they wouldn't do it and they wouldn't do it. And finally he threatened litigation. He said, I will freaking sue you. Get your name out of your rolls. And they sent him a letter and they say, fine, I forgot what they called it, but you now will no longer receive the benefits of baptism, which I read as kind of a threat. Like, oh,
Yeah,
have fun in hell is kind of what I was hearing. So I
sure.
don't know. Did you officially ask that they scratch you off the list and take you out of membership?
That's a process that a lot of my friends have gone through. A lot of family members, different people I know over the years have gone through, and it can be a long, arduous process of back and forth. Mine was fairly simple. The last time I spoke to any official church clergy member of this church, I had a meeting with my bishop, who was my, kind of like, it's like the pastor, the preach over my parish, call it. They call them wards here, and he was interviewing me to get ready for my mission and my worthiness of a mission. And I just let him know some things that were going on. I said, hey, I'm not really going to church right now, and I've started drinking alcohol, and my girlfriend and I are sexually active. And it was like so much that I was laying on this guy all at once. And he was like, whoa, 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 whoa. And he was like, hold on. And he's like, we're going to need to get a lot of this straightened out before you can go on a mission. And I just said, oh, it's okay. I don't think I'm going to go. And he was like, well, no, but we got to get this stuff straightened out. And I go, well, no, I don't think I'm going to come back to church. And he just went, why are you telling me this? And I said, well,
Wow.
because you're my neighbor and because I respect you. And I just wanted to let you know. And he just goes, okay, do you want me to do anything about it? And I went, not unless you feel like you have to, but I think we can just call it here. And he just went, okay. And that was the last conversation I ever had with somebody. I've never had my name officially removed from the records. As far as I'm concerned, it just doesn't really matter. It just is like, yeah, you got my name on a list of names somewhere that says that I'm part of your group, but I don't participate in any substantive way. I don't contribute funds to your organization. I don't, proselytize on behalf of your organization. I don't hold to any of the doctrinal truth claims that you guys hold to. It doesn't really matter to me that my name's on a list somewhere, but I know it's important to some people.
I came out of a hardcore fundy Christianity, like Bible literalist, Adam and Eve and Noah's Ark. And we
Yeah.
weren't young Earth. We didn't really think about it. We just thought, well, 6 literal days, but I don't know how old the Earth is, but God created everything. And so for me, it was Christian school, Christian church, Christian music. I was a Christian radio host for 12 years. And, I did 10 years of video production. Most of those videos were fundraising videos for churches. I traveled the country and did all that stuff. And it was in my mid 30s when I started to finally do my own thinking. And it's amazing what happens when you start asking questions and just have faith is not a satisfying answer. People are like, well, just, seek the Lord and he'll tell you, or take my word for it, or the experts know, or go with the flow, fake it till you make it. Once you decide that's not enough, and you overcome the fear of hell and those things, it's amazing how your world opens up. And so I came late to the party, man. I was almost 40 before I finally realized I didn't believe. And everybody in my circle went into panic mode, and they're still praying for my soul. And you got people in your circle right now who are like, oh my God, do you get your own planet in Mormonism, or is that a different religion? I can't remember.
No, that's right. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we get to hopefully be stewards over our own planet and have our own kind of cycle that Heavenly Father had of getting to create some kind of universe of our own. And we get the idea is this sort of idea, this principle of like infinite progression that you're constantly, which I think is kind of fun. The idea of like there should be some kind of place for you to grow in the afterlife, but yeah, I'm sure you've heard this before, but you absolutely have the voice of a person who hosted a radio show. You definitely
Yeah,
have the radio show host chops.
Austin, I make up for substance with style. I can mask a lot of empty calorie content with style. Trust me. And it's funny because I am privileged to talk to so many people. I don't know. I was on the stage recently, and I see you, Steph, and I think it was Ulrich on the switchboard. I'll get to you in just a second. I just spoke in Calgary at the We Can Reason conference, and they've got, I don't know, it must have been 3 PhDs. Dr. Eugenie Scott is there, for Pete's sake. And I'm totally starstruck. And I had to go up after her. And I just told the audience when I got up there, I'm like, this is not a humble brag. This is not false modesty. I'm looking at the program and I'm like, somebody got this shit in the wrong order, because holy cow. But I came to the movement at a time, 15, 16 years ago, when we had a lot of really smart educator types, but we didn't have a lot of storytellers, and that's changed. I mean, we have so many great storytelling voices, every people who are sharing their deconversion experiences and getting into the psychology of belief. And so the whole culture has changed. But back when I started, they had a guy at a lecture podium who would talk esoterically about stuff that went over most people's heads. And so when I came along, it was like, well, they admire so-and-so, but they can relate to me. And I was able to sort of humanize much of the journey. And I think sharing some of my own challenges with people, they got. I mean, how many people have been, their parents freaked out, or their spouse said, oh my God, I wanted to raise our kids in church, and now you're an atheist. What are we going to do? And is my marriage in jeopardy? And I've got kids calling who say my parents are going to pull all of my college funding if I ever say the word atheist again. They're holding my financial future hostage. Or maybe I'm just scared. I'm scared of being wrong. I don't know who I would be if I wasn't religious. And so I think when you and I both tell our stories, there's something I think that resonates with people. You got to get that kind of feedback on your end, right? You get emails and calls from people going, thank you, because I can relate, right?
Oh, absolutely. Of course. That's one of the big reasons why I do it, is to this day, almost 20 years later after my, kind of faith transition, I still have people that I grew up with reaching out and saying that they're going through their own transition, and that watching my content or listening to me on shows like The Line helped with their transition, and that they heard something that kind of unlocked a line of investigation or inquiry that helped with that. You asked earlier, do I have people praying for me too? And I did. When I first left, it was one of the hardest things that I've ever done in my life, because I didn't have support for it. I got sober almost 8 years ago. And when I did that, all of my friends and family were like so supportive. Everyone was like, oh, wow, congratulations. To this day, if I tell anybody, they go, wow, good for you. Congratulations. There's not a single person that's like, what a loser. People are like, oh, well, that's cool. When I left Mormonism, everyone in my life was just distraught. Everyone that knew me thought, what's going on? What's happened to him? I would hear that people were taught, they would tell me, they go, I'm going to be completely honest with you. We're all talking and we don't know we think you're lost. We think that you're on the wrong path. And, people, dear friends and family members, would tell me that they were concerned for my eternal well-being and for the well-being of my soul, and what darkness had overtaken me to lead me down this path. It doesn't really happen anymore. And so I am here also for people who are going through a faith transition to let them know it doesn't it's not hard forever, or it's not, it doesn't stay as hard as it was when you were first doing it. It gets better. It'll get easier with family members who are unwilling to talk right now, or with people, friends in the church who maybe aren't quite ready to meet you where you're at. It'll get easier as time goes on and they see that you're still you. At least that was my experience. Sometimes people aren't as lucky, but I think that it takes the time for them to go, oh, you're still the person I know. And there's something to that. The essential you-ness of you is still there, even without this organization and without this faith structure. You're still a good person and a person who wants to do good things in the world. And you're not like an evil person under the influence of Satan who's just going around, murdering and raping and doing all manner of evil things.
There was a debate recently in a suburb, and I remember who was doing the debate, and there was an apologist on stage who admitted, or he said, that, if it wasn't for my Christian faith, I'd be a rapist and murderer. And I remember the atheist who was debating said, well, in your case, I'm kind of glad you're, I mean, if this keeps you from raping and murdering, that's my number one priority at this point. But it is kind of a scary assertion. I see a few people on the switchboard. Would you like to dip our toe into these waters and see what happens, my friend?
Sure. I think Ulrich looks like he's got a good challenge for us.
I guess Ulrich I'm looking at the chat, he is a known quantity. Let us find out. Ulrich from Mexico, are you there?
Hello. Yes. Nice to talk.
Welcome to the party, my friend. You're on with Seth and Austin. What's on your mind? What do you want to talk about?
I want to talk about the inspiration behind all world literature.
All world literature. Hit me.
Or at least the famous one, right? The good literature, the classic literature.
Fine. All good classic literature that is known. What's your point?
Yes, they kind of go the same way. We have a harmony when it starts, then it is a disruption, and somehow we get into problems. Somebody loses their innocency, and then we get I would say, then we have another new harmony. That's the story the Bible presents. That's the story world literature presents. Because God is the one who inspires literature. That would be my point.
Okay, you're talking about two separate things there, Ulrich. You're talking about basic story structure, a story of like a hero's journey, say, but then you're making the jump to say that the reason why story structure exists is because God inspires it to be that way. Do you have evidence of God inspiring this story structure that you described?
Whole humanity, you can see how the world is right now. We're in the fallen state, which is in the path of the hero, like you call it. We're now in a certain stage. So how is that possible? Are we in a book?
So I was thinking with
are we in reality, which God wrote like a book?
Well, there's a lot of different books that reflect things about reality, and that's because humans are storytellers. Homo sapiens are storytellers. I was talking to my friends about this the other night, that I think one of the defining things about our species that separates us from other animal species on the planet is our capacity for storytelling. I think it's one of the things that led to our technological advancement and our sort of technological domination over the planet, is our ability to contextualize our experience through storytelling. So you think about being an early upright hominid and seeing something like a tornado or lightning in the sky or a solar eclipse and trying to contextualize that and make sense of it. Most animals will just look at it and kind of go like, I don't know what that is, and I'm going to keep trying to find food or keep trying to have sex, because that's what a lot of animals do. Human beings, for whatever reason, felt the need to try to give that some kind of some kind of context, and they started telling stories about these things. They started saying that these things were representative of deities and beings with powers and things like that. And those stories evolved over time, just like the species did. And it's one of the things that we it's kind of like one of our core evolutionary technologies is storytelling. And I agree with you. It's like, it's cool looking at stories throughout history. I completely disagree with you that this is evidence of some kind of overarching design by an intelligent creator. There's no evidence to support that. The fact that human beings are good at storytelling is just something that we evolved to do, and that's why we're here talking the way that we're talking on the internet and over a streaming device. But I don't see how it all connects to this big divine web that you see. Do you have an answer, Seth?
Well, I have to push back a little bit on this idea that all great and known literature follows essentially the three-part story arc. you know, all great
Sure.
literature. Well, you lost me at all, right? What's that line that says all generalities are false?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, what kind of literature? It could be a sonnet, it could be an 800-page tome. I mean, I don't know what you're talking about. So to say that all great and known literature all follows that establishment and then the conflict and resolution series, I don't buy that. That's all I was thinking here at the outset. Ulrich, did you want to speak to any of what's been said?
Uh, yes, because like, but it comes from a great mind, and for me, the miraculous thing is that the stories they all seem to tell the same story. The great stories tell the same story because they're God inspired.
Well, it's a massive conclusion that you jumped to there, Ulrich. I could just as easily I could say all the great stories tell the same story because human beings like that story structure. We just like it. It's reflective of things that we experience in our real day-to-day lives, and there it is. Why does it have to be because God inspired it? Do you have substantive evidence to present on this phone call that God inspired that story structure?
Look, what you say agrees to that. Why do people like that story structure? Because people are created by God. If you once would change your point of view just for a second and think, what would a Christian think about that? You might get to the same conclusion.
So
So,
when the
okay,
Islamic Allah, oh, forgive me, Austin, go
no,
ahead,
go, no.
brother.
I think you're going to say the exact same thing I'm going to say.
Well,
So go
yeah,
ahead, Seth.
my thought was, well, when the Islamic Allah then put this in place, we know that then the Quran and Islam is true, right?
Uh, what we specifically would say about God is not implied by that. Just say there is implied that there is a creator who inspires these great stories. That's what I'm saying. Muslims would say that
A higher power in the deistic sense, like some faceless other? Is it a specific God with a proper name? Who's behind it?
the creator of the universe is the one who inspires everything.
Uh-huh.
Like
But let
Christians
me
call
ask you
it
this
God.
question. Would this apply then to the Christian God? I mean, could we get more specific? Would you say that the Christianity model follows this story arc?
And the Jewish model also. I'm not very familiar with the Muslim model, but yeah, Christian and the Jewish model follow that.
Ah, okay. So is the implication then that the failure in the garden and the drowning of everybody during the global flood and the constant wars and murders and slavery and genocide, and 500,000 people in a single city slaughtered in one battle, and then Jesus having to come to be crucified, and all of that, was that then intended? It was written as part of the middle of the story before resolution. God wanted this to happen at the very beginning. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, because the end is much better than the beginning. And
Aha.
the Bible even
So
says
hang on,
God
hang on.
created.
So my question then must be, why would God set up a scenario where he would create any being, any child that he foreknew would end up in hell?
Um, for the bigger picture.
So the idea
Bigger
is,
story.
in order to have greater catharsis, or I don't know, a happier ending, then he needed the burning of flesh, or the regeneration of burning flesh in the fires of Hades, to happen to billions of people in order to facilitate the resolution at the end of the story.
No, the one does not cause the other. You're intentionally like mixing stuff up here. I get that.
Okay.
But God offers a solution. You can accept it or reject it. That's for everybody.
Austin, I'm going to sit back and let you work your magic. I've monopolized it long enough. I don't want to Bigfoot you here. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think Seth made a really, really good point, Ulrich, just about he was trying to say, okay, did this God that inspired the story of the Bible, is it the same God that inspired the story of the Quran? And you responded, well, I'm not really very familiar with the story of the Quran. And I guess that would be my question is, it seems like you are saying that it is the God of the Bible, the God of Christianity, who inspired this story. But also, are you just calling the Bible a story? Are you just saying this is like a screenplay that God wrote and that it's not a literal record of human history? Is that what you're positing?
No, I'm saying it's all of it. The Bible has many things. It is like it's a story, it's a screenplay, it's a parable, it's history, it's everything.
But if it's like, okay, so you said that the end of the Bible is better than the beginning. The end where God made into flesh, God who makes himself into flesh by having sex with a virgin girl, and then she has a son who's also him, and then he sacrifices himself to himself for the sins of all humanity, and that's like the end of like this like kind of arc of this story. But then he's resurrected, and then but then there's like a prophecy that like he's going to come back later, and it's going to be bad times again. But like, I don't know, the story, like if it's human history, the story is not at its end point. The story keeps going. If the Bible is the story of human history, then Genesis is the beginning of life, right? In the beginning, God created life. He created the heaven and the earth, that said, let there be light. He made the earth in 6 days. It's the beginning of everything. The end of the story has to be the end of the story of humanity, right? And we're not at the end of it yet. I don't know. Like, I just feel like, I mean, I'm going to be completely honest. I think that your like whole entire theory here is like really, really stupid. And I'm just trying to understand it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you just misrepresented almost everything the Bible says. But yes, you might also not understand what I'm trying to say here.
Right, because it's really dumb. I'm trying to give you the opportunity to like explain it better and be like, what is the evidence that God inspired the story of the Bible? Is the Bible just a story, or is it an actual historical record? I took a playwriting class when I was in college, and my teacher taught me about different structures for storytelling. So we learned, in school academically about different ways to effectively tell a story. I don't think that I was being like when I write, I'm not necessarily being inspired by the creator of the universe to write in whatever structure I choose. I'm making an academic call, and then I'm also, using some kind of creative intuition about what I think would serve the story the best and what would work for me best if I were the audience. But like, have you ever written anything, Ulrich? Have you ever actually tried to write a story?
Or broad umbrella, what is the end of the story? What is the happy ending you're referring to? What happens at that point?
At the end of the Bible story, it's saved humanity gets united with their God.
Okay, hang on. Hold on. So you want to talk about the Bible and its ending specifically? Because that's cool with me. I just want to make sure that's where we want to go.
Well, what's your question? You just, what's the ending? Or what do you mean by your question?
Well, I think I was trying to narrow it, and that's fair. If you say that Christianity works for this, right, the story of the Bible, where we have a happy beginning, and then we have conflict, and we have all of these issues, which are then resolved in the climax, and they all lived happily ever after. The problem I have with is I've read the book of Revelation, which includes hundreds of millions of people dying and sulfur raining from the sky, and the moon turns to blood, and judgment is unleashed by a seven-headed dragon riding space prostitute. And there are monsters, scorpion beasts, and all these other things going on. The four horsemen. I forget how many of the seals are broken, unleashing curses of death and mayhem and pain. So when you're talking about the climax of the story, the end of the story is pretty nasty. Would you agree?
Have you read until the end, like chapter 22? There, the end is not nasty.
Ah. So once the seven-headed dragon riding space prostitute comes down, the whore of Babylon, for those who aren't tracking, I just like to say it that way because it's awesome. And after hundreds and hundreds of millions of people die horribly and all those things happen, then there is joy and light and confetti and Yanni music and everything goes happily ever after. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, at the end, I said, read a book to the end. That might be for every book.
I think we may disagree on what a happy ending looks like, because I'm still looking at tens and tens or hundreds and hundreds of billions of people who were judged and are screaming in the fires of an eternal hell. And John Loftus wrote the book, didn't he? God and Horrendous Suffering, I think is the name of the book. We're talking about an entire human history of unnecessary and horrendous suffering. I don't think you can just put a punctuation mark or a few happy clappy words at the end of 66 books of the Bible and decide, well, now it's all light and love. I don't think it quite works like that. Austin, I don't know, anything else to add before we move on? By the way, the phone lines are wide open. Theists get priority. We would love to hear from you. But I'll talk to anybody who has something compelling. If they want to speak about or ask about something that is on their mind, dial in and let's chit chat. Austin, I'm sorry, go ahead. Anything else?
Oh, Ulrich, I would just say, since you're a regular contributor to the show and you call in fairly frequently, just try to think about the fact that, like, we're always going to ask you to provide evidence for whatever claim you're making when you call in. You don't seem to ever really be able to do that. I do remember, I think I've talked to you before on a previous episode. You just kind of call in and make an assertion about something that's like fairly ridiculous. And then when we go, okay, great, do you have evidence for that? You just go like, no, because it is. It is that way. Like, that's like all you've done on the, you've just been like, no, the Bible is inspired by God. And it's like, okay, but what's the evidence? And you're like, dude, all of it. Like the Bible and all the stories. And it's like, okay, I'm asking you for specific evidence that proves that the Bible was inspired or written by God, or is the word, the literal word of God, and that all stories throughout human history, all great stories, according to you, are the inspiration of the creator of the universe. And you're just like, they are, dude. They obviously are. That's not going to cut it on this show ever, but feel free by all means to continue calling in. I would just challenge you to try to come in with like a more, you know, a more robust rationale for whatever claim it is that you're going to come in and make. Yeah?
I think he's gone into a deep coma. Either that or the rapture has happened and he is now experiencing his own happy ending. Ehrlich,
wouldn't that be
thank
awesome?
you so much for dialing in to the show.
Wouldn't that be awesome if the rapture did happen while we were in the middle of one of these shows?
We would at least have some sort of evidence that something was going on. People, is this counter apologetics 101? Maybe, but you and I live in a culture where the Bible, the most printed book in history, people know it's true, but they don't know what's in it. And it's so freaking frustrating. And then this idea that it's the good book. Here in my own home state, they're trying to jam the Bible into our public school classrooms and throw the 10 Commandments on the walls of taxpayer-funded education institutions. And what's fascinating to me is that statistically, most Americans can't name even half of the 10 Commandments, right? They know we need them. They know they are moral pillars. They know they're true, absolutely true, but they don't know what they are. They know all the words to Bohemian Rhapsody, but they can't tell you what all 10 commandments are. And it's up to you and me to be like, well, did you know this is in here? And how do you explain that? And then we skip past all the happy, clappy, love thy neighbor verses and get into the awful stuff. And it doesn't seem to make a dent. They just thought, well, context, God is love, happy ending, that kind of
Also, I just I can't even begin to impress on these people how little I give a shit what's in the Bible. I just am like, I don't. First of all, you're right. We know we usually typically do have a better idea of what's actually in there than they do, and a more complete and a more honest assessment of it. But also, I'm just like, I don't care that you can find a verse that's like, but this verse is nice. This verse says something nice. I'm like, I don't care, because at the end of the day, I'm like, who the fuck? Like, you still need to establish some kind of evidential platform of conceivable, truth that like this thing matters. You need to be able to give me some kind of substantive argument as to why I should care at all. Because I could just talk about any book in existence. I could just be like, this book has a chapter that I like in it, and it does it like, cool. Good for you. There's a paragraph in the 3rd chapter of this book by this random author that I really enjoy. Okay, what does that mean? I just, you could, it's just, at the end of the day, I feel like most of what we do on this show is have theists call in and they tell us, I know that God is real because it says so in the magic book that I like. And it's like trying to explain to people, I don't care. Like, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that the book you like seems to suggest that that book is from God. That's not functioning evidence,
I had somebody in the chat apparently who is smirking every time I say the words happy ending. And so apparently I'm a double entendre factory. I just didn't realize it. I see one theist on the switchboard. I am mildly disappointed. You would think God would have greater defenders in this world. If you do want to call in and tell us who, what, where, why, how of deity or deities, we would like to know that. And I think that deity would like you to bring the goods. I mean, after all, you are the champion. You are the one who's going to tell us how and why it exists. God, he, she, it, I don't care. Dial in and let us know. Is it Gaz from Wales? Forgive me if I said it wrong. Help me out with the pronunciation.
Oh, hello, Seth. Can you hear me?
Indeed, I can. How do I pronounce your name?
It's just Gaz.
Gaz. Wonderful. You're on with Austin and Seth. We would love to talk to you. What's on your mind?
I just wanted to have your opinion, really, on deathbed visions. Hours before people pass, they seem to get their clarity, like people with dementia, and they talk about seeing like they dead relatives that are in the room come to escort them. Even people, for example, that they not aware that have died, things like that.
Austin, did you want to talk to or speak about the near-death or after-death experiences that people say is proof of an afterlife?
Sure. I talked about this with our last caller about the Homo sapien proclivity for storytelling and the effect that it's had on us psychologically and metaphysically and just as a species in general, the way that it shaped our progression and our evolution, the stories that we tell about existence, the stories that we tell about the origin of our species, the stories that we tell about the origin of the universe, and indeed the stories that we tell about where we go after we die. And this kind of falls into that area. I worked as a hospice nurse in my early 20s, and I watched a lot of people in the end of life situation that you're describing. And, our brains and our bodies, it's really, really fascinating. You talk to anyone who works in healthcare, they'll tell you this. They know how to die. And especially when a person is dying slowly, when a person is in some kind of care facility and it's not something immediate, not some immediate kind of trauma like a gunshot wound or a car accident, when someone is dying slowly of a disease, the brain and body sort of have this process of shutting down. And there is this period that people will call, I think it's called like the lift, and it's like a few days before everything really starts shutting down, where there's this clarity, like you described with dementia patients and things like that. And all of a sudden, there's this kind of euphoria that happens, and it's sort of a beautiful process that our bodies and brains sort of let us have while we're in this end phase. It doesn't happen for everybody. Not everybody is fortunate enough to get to experience something like this, whether they're experiencing it personally or watching a loved one go through it. But this human proclivity for storytelling, there's all kinds of different things that are going on during this death process. There's the leaking of the chemical DMT in the brain, this psychedelic chemical that goes into the brain during the actual process of death, where people have near-death experiences and they're revived and they go, "Oh, I saw this thing." You can see what a lot of people describe if you go and get DMT and smoke DMT. I'm not saying that there aren't universal, or not universal, but collectively reported experiences, kind of like people report with like sleep paralysis demons or things like that. I'm just saying that these things don't serve as substantive evidence of the existence of an afterlife. They could just as simply be a very rational, reasonable, plausible explanation for these things could be that human beings have a shared knowledge of stories about what happens after you die. And during this process, when the brain is shutting down, when the body's shutting down, as a means of comforting the person who is experiencing this sort of transitionary period, they kind of go into a psychedelic hallucination that involves a lot of elements of what they've been told about what happens after a person dies. And I think that that's just as reasonable, just as plausible, if not more so, of an explanation than that they are actually being visited by the passed on, forced ghosts or spirits of their family members that went before them, or, being shown visions of the afterlife. That's sort of my explanation.
Yeah, but you got to think there's like people, like, say with dementia, and say like their brother or sister died like a week before.
Gaz, do me a favor. Back your mouth off of the microphone or your cell phone or whatever you are using, because you are distorting to the point where we can't understand you. So if you can soften your voice and just draw back from that microphone just a little bit and start over again. What were your thoughts?
Is this any better?
Better.
That's
Thank you.
a lot better.
What I think, a lot of atheists have deathbed visions as well, but the ones I find more compelling is like people with dementia or serious illness who's had somebody pass on like a week or two before then, and they're not aware that that particular person have died, but that person then appears, say, with their mother or father who have already passed on as well. How can that be explained as like an hallucination or something?
Well, if I may, the phenomenon of hypoxia, people whose brains are dying, they are oxygen deprived, and we see a surge of carbon dioxide, and there are other chemical factors there that are going on. The brain starts to fire in very wild directions. People have reported a white light. Memories are triggered. And so then if you have encountered people that you have loved, and whether it be a great grandmother or a child or something along those lines, those may image in your brain in moments right before death. So whether you have dementia or whatever your cognitive status is, I think we're still talking about a brain that is misfiring because it is oxygen deprived or it's chemically altered in some way. And even if there was not hypoxia or a chemical alteration of some kind, if somebody was near death or they were dead on the table for 90 seconds and came back, we're still in the arena of the anecdote. And anecdotes are nothing more, nothing less. And I like that sentence where, the plural of anecdote, the plural of anecdote is not evidence. So, I mean, these are interesting. We're fascinated by them, but they're certainly not really evidence of anything, except we've got a misfiring mind.
No, I agree with what you're saying. They're not evidence, but they certainly are questionable.
I think they're interesting. We'd agree on that, wouldn't we, guess?
Oh, they're certainly interesting. I mean,
Would it be then?
hallucination, you hallucinate, random things. People
Yeah,
who seem to be dying, it
wouldn't
only
it
seems to
be?
be.
I'm walking all over you, and that is my fault, Gas. Go ahead, finish your sentence.
Okay, I was going to say hallucinations are random things. People can see anything from animals, goblins, ghouls, whatever. But these deathbed visions, they only seem to incur people pets that have passed on.
Right, hang on. Deathbed visions only occur to people who are on their deathbed?
I think he's saying that what he's saying is you can see anything in a hallucination, but people on their deathbeds are only seeing people who have passed on. They're only seeing, loved ones who have gone before them. So they're seeing visions of things that are awaiting them in the life hereafter. They're not just seeing, unicorns and goblins and things like that.
So the commonalities, the white light, maybe a deity figure, the people they've loved, perhaps loved and lost in their lives, these commonalities bind them all together in experience.
Is that
I was
right,
asking
Gaskell?
you, Austin.
Sorry.
Like I want to make sure that I'm tracking along with what you're explaining. Yeah, just when you talk to me, use your hands. Use small words when you communicate to me, Austin. I will figure it out eventually.
I believe so, right, Gaz?
Yes,
that's what you were saying. But that's what you were saying, right?
Well, yes, it was.
Yeah. So my explanation would be exactly what I said to you earlier, which is the human brain has a great capacity for story retention and storytelling. And when you're in an experience that you've been told stories about your entire life, like a death cycle, and you've been told your entire life that you are going to be visited by people who have passed on before you, it makes sense that when you have a hypoxic brain that's starting to show you images and things that are you're starting to hallucinate or have very vivid visions in your mind of what might be happening next, it's going to unfold in the way that it's been told to you. It's going to unfold, the story that you've been told about what this experience is going to be the kind of story that unfolds in your mind about it. I think we've offered you some very plausible real world explanations that can exist outside of a supernatural explanation. I think the ultimate answer to this question of why do people see the things that they see right before they die is something that no one can actually definitively answer, because no one can actually definitively answer the question, why does anything pop into anyone's head at any moment? Why did I dream last night that I was driving and I wound up at my high school girlfriend's house, but she was a 40-year-old Filipino woman that I'd never seen before, but I knew in my brain that it was the same woman? I don't know. I can't tell you why, but that's what happened. And I don't, the question of why do these things happen? Why is there a commonality of experience? No one can actually definitively answer that. I think we've posited plausible explanations to you. I would now turn the question back to you and say, do you have anything that could work as substantive evidence that this is, a functioning framework by which we can understand the existence of God, the existence of an afterlife? Do you have anything for that?
Well, basically, when you're saying, it's down to brain hypoxia and things like that, that really wouldn't make sense, because if the brain is dying and not working tidy, why would your brain be physically seeing your dead relatives, and these relatives are actually telling these people on a specific day and time that they're going to come back for them and they're going to pass, and that to physically happen?
I told you guys,
to me, is not hypoxia.
Well, I told you guys, I don't know why anyone's brain would see a particular thing. I don't actually have the answer to that question. I've given you some plausible possibilities as to why, but maybe Seth has an answer.
No. I think what the mind is drawing from experiences, and then we're still in the arena of the anecdote where they told me this date or they told me this thing. To my knowledge, have been no studies. There's no traceable record that these experiences have predictive quality. And we also understand the subjective nature of human thinking. We understand that memories are imperfect. We often remember things far differently than they actually happened. It's an interesting conversation, but for us, there's nothing here that constitutes anything remotely evidence for posthumous existence, heaven, reincarnation, any of those types of things. And if that evidence becomes available, we would want to know that. Okay, Gas?
Okay. Have you ever heard of Katharina? I think it's Hamer.
I'm not understanding you, my friend. Back away from the mic real fast. Say it again. Have I heard of what?
Have you ever heard of a person called, I think it's Katharina Hamer?
No.
If you can Google her name when you got time. Basically, she was somebody that was born physically disabled, mentally. She never spoke. You know, she never had a conversation in her life. Nothing. And a couple of hours before she died, she started randomly singing and speaking normal, as if a completely different person had appeared.
Okay. Well, my first question is if this is ostensibly a created being and all of this is proof of some agency and an afterlife, why would the creator of this disabled person wait till the final hours of her life to allow her speech? That's a whole other conversation. I am going to move on, Gaz. Thank you so much for your call from Wales, and be safe over there, okay? I talked about this in the past. Forgive me if it's been too recent or it was on this show. I can't remember, Austin, but I suffer from sleep paralysis. And for those who don't know what it's, they're called night terrors. It doesn't happen very often, like 3 times a year. And it used to freak me out a lot more when I was a believer. Forgive me if we've got a lightning storm, so my camera and everything may be flashing. And so we've got major weather. We've had tornadoes and floods and the whole thing. And there's another round coming in as we speak. So the lights are flickering here. If I disappear, that's why. It's not necessarily the judgment of God, is what I'm saying. So what happens in sleep paralysis is when we dream in stage 4 sleep, obviously our brain paralyzes us physically so that whenever we dream we're running the marathon, we're in the Olympics or we're doing whatever, we're flying, we're not laying in bed, flapping our arms and running our legs and whatnot. It paralyzes the body. We may twitch a finger, but the brain has prepared the body for REM sleep. With night terrors or sleep paralysis, you are actually dreaming, but your body is like almost near conscious. So you can sometimes actually see in the room. You are totally immobile. You cannot move a muscle hardly, and you panic. And so your heart starts to beat out of your chest and you know you can't move. Some people report a figure, a dark figure in the room somewhere looming, and I've had that happen. And for me, Natalie has to reach over and wake me up because she can hear me over there like panicking in my sleep. And there are some people who say, well, there's a commonality of experience here. You wake up, you feel like there's something sitting on your chest, suffocating you. There is a being, a human type shape looming over your bed. Everybody many people report a similar experience. This must be proof of something. And I find that a fascinating, I don't know, a guess or claim. But for me, it's just proof we are human beings. It's proof we don't have proof. And so when he was talking about the commonality of reported experiences, I was thinking about my own experience. And now, there have been whole documentaries produced about people who report the being who was looming over their bed. Well, I've seen that thing, but I don't know that it's a demon. or something like that. Austin, I'm just babbling.
No, I've seen that documentary, and I agree. It's like anytime there's it's exactly what you're going to go do with this ghost hunting thing that you do. That people will report these similar stories about ghosts, about oh, the temperature changes just so in a room when an entity becomes angered by your presence or something like that. And I the fact that there is a commonality of experiences reported of things that people are alleging to see or witness at the moment of death or just before the moment of death. Like I said, the question of what's the explanation for that? Again, we on this show are not the ones making the truth claim about what the explanation of that is. We don't come on this show and go, I know exactly why that happens, and here's my explanation. And then, we're not the ones who are having to defend the claim. When you're a theist calling in with that question, your claim is this commonality of experience is proof of an afterlife. It's proof of a higher power. It's proof of the existence of a God. And what your charge is when you call in on the show is to demonstrate evidence of that claim that you're making. We're not making that claim. I'm perfectly fine saying, I don't know why some people see the things they see when they're in active sleep paralysis or when they're in an active death cycle. I can posit to you explanations that to me seem more rational and reasonable and in line with objective observable reality than God or magic. But my ultimate answer is I don't know, and I'm comfortable with that answer. You're the one who's claiming to know what the explanation is. So you need to be calling in with something that is, you just need to be calling in with stronger evidence, basically.
I will say one thing that has been happening recently that freaks me out. I've got this cat. His name is Cat. We spell it with a K. And in the middle of the night, he will jump up on the bed and he will loom over my face. And I'm in the dead, so I'm so asleep.
Mm-hmm.
And he will hold his head there and then just go, "Ah!" And it just scares the shit out of me. And
sure.
I think it amuses him because he's starting to do it more often. And anyway.
And I think it amuses him as a better explanation than your cat is warning you of like a dark demon or something. Sure. I really like this call, the why should I not believe call. I think that's a fun question.
I'm in. You want me to grab it here? We've got Alfredo calling out of California. Welcome to the show. Can you hear us?
Yes, loud and clear. Hi there, Seth.
I need you to back off your microphone. We've got distortion for some reason on our calls tonight. So back up 2-3 inches for me, okay?
Is this better? Or
it is better. Hit us. What do you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be straight up. I don't have any evidence to prove the existence of let's say the God of the Bible, but I do want to know more from you guys on your point of view of life in general. I don't know, God, religion, and respectfully, why you guys have this certain belief about things, just I don't know, basically what your takes are on about reality, if that makes sense.
Wow, that's a broad one. Okay, let's start with what I'm seeing in the description on the switchboard, which is you struggle to disbelieve in a God. Can we start there?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
I didn't choose not to believe. I can't walk out the door and say, today I will not believe in gravity, or today I will believe in unicorns, or believe that I can fly, right? I either do or don't, and that happens innately and organically. I can choose what I admit to myself and to others, but the belief itself is simply happening. I didn't set out in my life to kill God. I don't want to believe or disbelieve in the idea of a God. I do absolutely reject and disbelieve in the specific gods with proper names that have been posited by religions, obviously human-made religions like Christianity, Islam, etc., because we can examine specific points, truth claims the quote unquote historical record, miracles, prophecies, etc. And we can dismantle those and realize that that's bullshit and it doesn't work. But even in the broad
Okay.
sense of a deistic higher power watchmaker, I don't care, some god somewhere. I didn't wake up saying today I don't want to believe it. I choose to be an atheist. It doesn't work that way. I simply don't see any
Right.
evidence for it, and I don't believe it. I don't buy it. Do I know how the universe began? Nope. And neither does Austin, and neither do you, and neither does anybody else. And that's okay. That's the honest answer. So is that a good starting point
Yeah.
for us, Alfredo?
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. I mean, sorry, this is my first time calling, so I was just
You're
a little
doing good.
nervous, but
That's all right.
yeah.
I liked the question. The reason why I wanted to talk to you, Alfredo, I liked the question in your subtitle that said, "Why shouldn't I believe?" You said, "I struggle to disbelieve," and then you said, "Why shouldn't I believe?" As though you were asking, like, maybe what's the harm in believing? What's wrong? Is there, like, is there any downside to choosing to believe? I mean, we're all just kind of floating along on this rock in the void of space, right? What's the difference whether we
Right.
believe in the God of the Bible or the God of Islam or the God of, any other religion, or don't believe in God? I would posit this. I would just say, you live in a world that is bedeviled by religious calamity. You live in a world where most of, like, the greatest conflicts that are happening in the world that you live in and throughout the history of human civilization have been disputes over theology. I mean, at the end of the day, the
Mm-hmm.
situation in Gaza right now in the Middle East is a theological dispute. It's a dispute between two theologies. That is the core of what is
Right.
going on there. There's obviously cultural clashing, and there's a lot of cultural indoctrination and cultural dogma at play, but that culture is informed by theology. It's informed by someone thinking we have a higher, more pure, holy claim to this region, to this plot of geography than you do. Our book is better than your book. Our version of the God story is better than your version of the God story, and they use all of that to justify the dehumanization of the people that they need to fight against, and to make it okay to kill children and blow up hospitals and do whatever they need to do. And that goes, I mean, I firmly believe that what Israel is doing right now is a genocide, but it goes in both directions, right? Like, part of the reason why
Right.
Islamic terrorists believe that they can do the things that they can do, they are trying to resist an apartheid ethno state, but they also believe they have a theocratic claim here, that they have a theological claim over the land and over the region, that they actually have the claim to be the more holy people. You do not, it simply doesn't exist in the world you live that there is some kind of theological dispute between different warring groups of atheists. The only place you're going to find that is in the realm of satire. There's a popular string of South Park episodes where in the future, different warring atheist factions are fighting, and they're all like, our science, our logic over your science and your logic. And that's like this, it only exists in satire. We don't actually have that in the world. So as a starting out point to the question, why shouldn't I believe, or what's the harm in believing? Well, you wouldn't be contributing to all of that nonsense as a starting out place. Does that work for you?
Yeah, that works fine for me. I don't want to be ignorant or gullible. I want to, like, obviously, like, know the truth and, basically receive it as is. And, I claim to be a Christian, but, I've been slowly, like, kind of, like, just walking away from, like, the faith and, just choosing really just to see what I believe in. Like, basically believe in what I see with my eyes. I kind of go
Well,
from there and just
it's not just believing what you see with your eyes, because human perception can be flawed, but we have to go into the realm of testing and retesting, and is there evidence? And the great British philosopher Bertrand Russell, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, if a thing is true, we should believe it. If it is not true, we should not believe it. And if we don't know, we should withhold judgment. And so I think that's
Okay.
it's not about whether it makes us happy or fills the blanks in our knowledge or alleviates our fears or any of those types of things. I think if it's true, it's true. If it's not, it's not. And if we don't know, we simply say we don't know. And that opens the door to a curious life of real discovery where you're not locked in a box, man. You can get out and find out what the world is really like. So my encouragement to you is regardless of what you call yourself, continue to challenge, continue to ask questions. And I'll give you this piece of advice. The second somebody says a question is forbidden, you're not allowed to ask that. It's sacred, it's off limits. The second somebody says that, you take that question and you put it at the top of your list. And you ask that one first.
Okay.
All right?
Right. Okay. I do appreciate your guys' time, and I will be tuning in more into your guys' YouTube channel. I've recently just discovered it, and I find it like very fascinating. Like how you guys are very intelligent and like just speak about like various topics about certain things outside of religion.
No, you're very kind.
Alfredo, it sounds like you're asking all sorts of good questions, and I would just encourage you to keep doing that. And exactly what Seth said. If somebody says you don't need to worry about that question, ask that question first, and don't stop pursuing
Okay.
that question until you get an answer that seems to make sense. So,
All right. I do appreciate it. Thank you, Austin.
Appreciate it.
yeah.
Wherever he ends up, I hope it is a happy ending. There's something else I was going to say. You ever do that? Like, why did I walk in this room? Where did I put my
Sure.
keys? What's my password? I just did that. There's something I was going to say, and it's just gone. It's just gone.
I mean,
don't
I
know.
could
Do you
have
have any further
continued.
thoughts? Go ahead.
Well,
Go ahead.
I could have continued ranting too about just along that question of like, well, what's the harm in believing? And I talked about wars, and how most disputes between two groups of people come down to theology. There's, the reason why a lot of American Christians are Zionists is because they have a theological stake in, Jews being the stewards over that region until the second coming of their God. And, but I could have gone further and said, the only reason why there's a justification for families to be torn apart by one of the members of the family being queer, being gay or bisexual or pansexual or being trans or gender diverse in some way, is because of religion. There's no reason why, a father or a mother should disown their child for being trans outside of a religious justification, a theological justification. There is no, secular justification for that kind of behavior. And you just don't see that kind of stuff. You don't see secular families breaking apart because one of them is going against like some deeply held doctrine or principle that is unfalsifiable and there is no evidence for. You might see secular families having issues where one of them starts to be an adherent to some kind of theology that makes them an asshole, but like that's the problem of theology, not the problem of atheism. So like a lot of just these issues that you see in real life where it's like, oh yeah, like why are people cruel to each other this way? There's so much justification for cruelty in theology, and you just don't really see that stuff in secularism, in skeptic circles. It's like, yeah, the only justification I ever have to be an asshole to anyone is you were an asshole to me first.
Do
It's
you
just
feel like, though, I mean, you and I are just, I don't know. Do you feel like that religion in many of those cases is a subset of tribalism, our evolved tribal tendencies, in grouping and out grouping, which isn't necessarily religious? We see political groups in group and out group each other. I've seen factions within atheism, and they will in group and out group each other and, declare war on each other and tear each other to pieces and those types of things. I'm not sure that that type of conflict is all necessarily religious. I think religion certainly is often a major factor, but do you feel like the larger umbrella would be just our evolved tribalistic tendencies?
I think that makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. And again, tribalism is an offshoot of the whole storytelling thing I was talking about too. That it's like you start to tell yourself a story about your tribe and why your tribe is superior to the other tribe and why your tribe is a better tribe for the future of the species. And but it's Yeah, absolutely. And I
Sure.
think that there are things that tribes that people can belong to that they tell themselves stories about that aren't necessarily theological and aren't necessarily rooted in something supernatural. But I do think that there's something under a lot of that points back to we've got a better story about the origins of the universe and about existence than you do.
Sure. I'll buy
And
that.
yeah. Mhm.
Okay. I just found it interesting. You and I could probably
Yeah.
talk for an hour on this one. I've got
Yeah.
everyone's saying I should take this call out of Florida from Maryland. So let's do it. Maryland, welcome to the show with Austin and Seth. Are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I
Can you
can
hear me okay?
indeed.
Okay.
Let's talk.
Okay.
What's going on?
All right. I guess we could start with what I was screened with. I think we're all gods because of God.
Well, define what you mean by God. If we are all gods, I'm a god, you're a god, what's the nature of us as gods?
The same nature as what most everybody is idolizing God for, I guess. We're supposed to be the comfort and we're kings and queens and everything should be free. I don't know.
No, I
Yeah,
mean, it's not a
we're
trick
kings and
question. I'm
queens.
not trying to ambush you. I think, you say the word God, and it brings
Mhm.
into our imagination the idea of godlike attributes and godlike powers.
Right, right.
Is it that you're saying that we may have innate godlike attributes and powers, or is it that we are the controllers of our own destiny, which would be something else?
Why does it got to be divided? Why can't it be both?
Well, I don't know that I have any supernatural godlike powers. So, are you saying that I have them and haven't tapped in? Do you have them? Does Austin have them? What makes us godlike?
I don't know if you ever thought of somebody and then they just call you. I mean, I think telepathy is real, and we have things that we, do instinctually that's not very, tied with reality. So there are things we tap into, but I feel like there are gatekeepers, people that are other, sons and daughters of God or whatever, other siblings that withhold a lot of information from us that
Okay.
would further that opening.
Before I
Yeah.
pinball over to Austin, I hear about, I feel like it, I'm hearing a lot of you're connecting dots in your mind.
Okay.
What I'm interested in is what is the evidence that you and I are gods?
Okay. I figure on if you're trying to go on the spectrum of our knowledge as of yet, mankind has accumulated, you would say the highest vibration or the highest way of thinking would be the God realm of royalty and being a co-heir and being, with all the power and all the authority. And then the lowest vibration that, doesn't feel as great would be the total opposite. So why would we not pick the highest of high, of excellence, of feeling, and authority and power and love and worship and honor on each other? Why would we not pick that side rather than, this long suffering and this is worshiping idols and giving power over here and over there
Well, hang
when
on.
we are the worthy for it?
If we may, I'd like to hear the highest vibrations of the voice of Austin Archer to see what he might have to say about all of this, what he's heard so far. What are you thinking, my friend?
You describe yourself as a theist, Marilyn. Do you have a specific God structure that you adhere to? That you like? Is there like God of the Bible? Are you a Christian? Is there a religion that you subscribe to? That you go? Is there a church that you go to?
No, see, when I was on the screening, she asked theist or atheist, but I don't like, I honestly feel like atheists are closer to God than theists are. So it's
Okay.
it's kind of in the air for me about that. because, theists are they have a lot of, just obstacles and barriers and things. The atheists, I feel like they're much more aware of their power and much more aware of their autonomy than the
Okay,
cult
cool.
out there.
That helps answer my question. I was just trying to get a better idea of like where you're approaching this from, and I think that helps answer my question. I think if I'm not, I just want to make sure I got the parameters of this correct. If I'm not mistaken, you're sort of taking the concept of God, the Word of God, and you're giving it a definition that feels more complete to you, that makes sense to you, where it's like kind of like either everything is God or nothing is God. We're either all God or no one is God. And you prefer to choose the description, the answer, we all are God. But you're sort of recontextualizing the way that word is used for most people into a definition that feels more humanistic and honoring of the human divine and human intelligence, right? Is that correct?
How so, though? Like, how so? Because I feel
Well,
like
I
we
guess I'm
were,
just trying to ask if you're. I'm just trying to ask if you believe in like an intelligent designer, like a creator, a person, a being that created all life and all intelligence in the universe, or if you believe that we are the collective consciousness of mankind, the collective consciousness of all living beings is what people are talking about when they use the word God. I'm just trying to get parameters of what it is specifically that you believe.
gosh, I can't really pick like, I feel like nothing you said really wasn't true. Both sides really, like, there is
So
a real,
you do believe in a creator? You believe in like an intelligent designer?
I mean, yeah, I don't think we're gods by our own abilities. I think we're gods because of God, because we know the highest architect of who God is and His character. So, I mean, to have that, example would
So
have
we
to
are not
testify.
God. We are the creations
No,
of God.
we're all God because we were known before the world began, and we were, like we said in the beginning, let us make them in our image, and we were the image of God, and we were blessed, and
Wait.
we were called very
So
good.
that's a Christian concept, and this is what I'm trying to nail down is like what specific, because it does sound like you do believe in a singular God that we are all the creations of.
I mean, yes, but I feel like that's still us. Like, it's still like there's no separation. We've always existed. Like,
Okay, I'm
we
getting
all
lost.
created
Maybe
it
Seth,
together.
yeah.
We all created it together, but we're all part of the body of Christ. Does that make sense when they say we're all
Okay,
part
so
of the
there it
body
is.
of Christ?
Okay, okay, good.
We're
Okay, so
all
Christian. All right. Okay, we got there. I don't know why that was so hard. I don't know why it was so hard for you to just like admit that you're a Christian. Like I feel like what was going on there is you really didn't want to admit that you were a Christian. You wanted to like sound really new age and cool with it, and then you finally got around to like
I'm not.
body of Christ.
I
No, no,
believe
no, 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 no. You just said body of Christ, and you talked about God in our image and all that stuff.
because
So
that's what you would understand by saying that. When I would say the body of God, but the body of Christ, yes. But Jesus also said, anyone who does
I
my
don't
Father's
give a shit.
will is my
Because
brother, sister,
you
and
could
mother.
say Allah, you could say Allah, you could say Buddha. I don't give a shit who you say. I'm asking, who do you think of when you're talking about the design? That's what I'm trying to nail down. You said body of Christ. So I'm trying to get parameters of what it is that you like, what God do you
Right.
adhere to?
Right, but we're all co-heirs, so it's not like Mohammed is any better. He's a co-heir also. Like, even Allah said to follow the gospel of Jesus Christ and His disciples. So it's all like the same sequitur. There's no no one's above or below anyone. We're not
I don't
above the
think that's
Father or
what the
below the
Bible
Father.
says.
Yeah. I
But
don't
I'm
think
not.
that's
if
what
I
I'm
may,
not. I'm not
look, even
claiming a
if we are
doctrine.
including the Bible as an echo or perhaps a limb on the body of a larger God, um, how do I say this? As God is represented within the cosmos, maybe Christianity is simply one representation or one incarnation of that God. I don't think we're really getting anywhere that is cogent here. What I would like though is before we move on, I really want to understand. You are saying that we are all connected, and because we were created by God and we are all part of this cosmos, we all then take on a kind of ownership in that godhood. Is that close?
I mean, it's close, I guess. That's. I mean, I don't see anything wrong with that. I guess we could probably dig further into it, but I don't see anything wrong with that.
Well,
I
Marilyn,
just feel
I
like
don't know that I have. Go ahead. Forgive me. Go ahead.
one more thing. I just don't feel like I feel like I use Christ because it's the closest to that higher frequency of like loving everyone. Don't, don't judge, don't you have to forgive or won't be forgiven. It's basically like the highest thing we have to unconditional forgiveness and being blameless is the best linguistically I can explain
Is it
it.
possible, though,
But
Marilyn, that the best teaching, we'll call them, I mean, there are other conversations to be had about whether or not always turning the other cheek and loving your enemies, et cetera, is really a good teaching. And I don't think it is. But is it possible that these are just philosophies that could have just as easily been written down by human beings?
yes,
Be
I mean
kind, be
yes, I
charitable,
feel
love
like
thy
we're all
neighbor. I mean,
God.
could that have
We're
come
all God.
organically from a mortal human being?
Well, Jesus also said, if your eyes cause you to sin, pluck them out rather
I don't
than go
care
and
what the
judge
Bible
someone
said
you talk
Jesus
to.
said. What I want to know is it possible that that these stories, the claims, the philosophies, etc., simply came from the mind and hand of a human author that was not a god, a mortal?
I wouldn't call him a human or mortal, but yes, it came from him, and they give those words to those people. But I feel like they're also another them from. I feel like they're God. They're also God. So
Okay.
they're another
Yeah.
human. Yes, they're another human, but they're also God. Everyone is. Yeah. But this was great. I'm gonna call in again with more questions. I appreciate y'all taking my call and
Well,
everything.
hold on. Hold
Um,
on.
but
Don't run away. Hold on. One
I feel
second.
like y'all want to get rid of me.
Well, I'm just trying to
But
understand what's going on here. So, like, I'm part of an organization. I mentioned earlier on this stream that I'm sober, and I'm part of an organization that a lot of people think is religious. I don't personally think it is. I've been an atheist in this organization for 8 years, and no one's ever had a problem with it, and no one's ever, asked me to leave because I'm an atheist. I'm friends with lots of atheists in this organization, and we use the word God a lot in that organization, and I was able to decide for myself how I want to define the usage of that word. And I've come up with a what I think is a secular definition of that word that's very similar to what you're saying, where I kind of think that when people use the word God, they're talking about this sort of collective experience, this like collective existential consciousness that can sort of like ancestral, generational, evolutionary consciousness that can be tapped into. And I think that there is something to it, to the universality of like, oh, I have a certain experience when I lean into the idea of something bigger than myself that seems to be useful. But what gets people tripped up is they get stuck on dogma of like the specific definition of what God is or who God is or what God's mind is. And I kind of go like, oh, like I think that word is like, we are the creators of that story. Human beings created the story of God, of this all-powerful intelligence that designed the universe. Therefore, we are in some way exactly what you say, like we did create God in our image. We are the creators of the creator, but not in a supernatural sense. Nothing I'm saying here is magic. Nothing I'm saying here is like human beings are like the creators of the universe, and human beings have, omnipotent, limitless power. And it does sound like what you're talking about is it is supernatural, that we do have some kind of access to godlike power of the creation of universes and the creation of intelligences and kind of the limitless understanding of all of the mysteries of the universe. And that's what I'm trying to get a beat on. Is that right?
right, like writing the Bible, it could say in the beginning, man created the earth and everything and separated the waters. Like man did all this stuff because he first linguistically confessed. He confessed that this happened, and the first confession is saying that it happened. Therefore, man is the one that created these things because he said
Yeah.
they are
Okay.
so.
Cool. So I guess I would just go to like I kind of like fuck with the idea that God is either everything or nothing. If
Yeah.
if we're going to use that word at all, but my thing is like my version that I rock with, I have a plausible explanation for that's rooted in reality. It's just the history of humanity. It's just the history of Homo sapiens, the history of storytelling, the nature of like we created these myths to contextualize our experience,
Right.
to make sense of things like volcanoes, to make sense of things like lightning, to make sense of things like death. We were so aware of our own existence and we needed to give it some kind of rooting. But that's not a supernatural explanation. But I do believe that like my explanation has evidence that supports it. And I'm just wondering, do you have any evidence whatsoever to support your claim that we do in fact have the ability to tap into supernatural godlike abilities?
Well, I mean, I feel like I've heard and seen a lot of things, but those aren't examples. I just know God's character, I guess, and I feel like he's a God of restoration and not retribution. I don't feel like there's a hell. I don't like evil. I feel like evil is the intentional throwing off of the equilibrium. And
All right. Why do you feel like that?
manifest.
Why do you
Huh?
feel like those things? Why do you feel those things? You're saying a lot of I feel. I asked you for evidence. You said,
Right.
I feel like this and I feel like this. Why do you
Like,
feel like that? What's the evidence that makes you feel like that?
because evil only happens when it comes out of your mouth, like you manifest it and speak it and think it. Like if you weren't to do those things, they wouldn't happen. So like if you know your God, if you know you're all good and all great and all powerful and with all power and authority, you won't think to those levels of thinking thoughts only the enemy would have in his head. You would
All
know that.
powerful, all power and authority. Can I fly?
Right.
Can you fly, Marilyn?
I mean, there are airplanes, so yes, technically you can fly. It
No,
was
can you
created.
right now go outside and fly and levitate off the ground and fly to where I am in Sandy, Utah? Not with a plane, with your
No,
physical form.
no,
Well then
but
you're not all
but
powerful, are
like
you?
I said earlier, there are gatekeepers that withhold information from us and don't give us that
Mm,
amount of knowledge and stuff. I bet we could if we had access to that. But everyone wants to be a
yeah,
gatekeeper and a handler of other people. So
I bet we
Marilyn,
it's all
could.
witchcraft.
thanks for the call.
Yeah.
And
You're
all my
welcome.
best to
Thank
you
you,
down
guys.
there
I'll
in
call
Florida.
again.
All right.
Okay. Bless
Well,
you guys.
see you later.
That was wild. That's man. I mean,
I
it's
feel like
fun.
we just spent 10 minutes with a random word generator. A lot
Yeah.
of I feel like and a lot of concepts that were sort of mashed together from left field, right field, center field, outer space, another
hmm
dimension. It's
You know what it
hard because go ahead, brother.
Oh no, you finish your thought. Sorry.
No. That was the end of my thought. I was just babbling. Go ahead.
I was going to say it reminded me of the documentary about the cult of Mother God. Did you watch that documentary?
Never seen it.
There's this woman who started a cult, and it was we're all God, everyone's God, I'm God, you're God, and she would say that everyone's God, but then once enough people were following her, she slowly shifted it to being, but I'm more God than you guys are. And she slowly started introducing hierarchy of like who's the most God. And so she was now Mother God, and everyone called her Mother God. And basically what it wound up being was she was just a raving alcoholic who just wanted people to wait on her, and that's what it was, is they just would make her grilled cheese sandwiches and things, and while she sat in the other room drinking Jose Cuervo and like yelling at them. And
Wow.
but it's that same philosophy. It started out with like we're all God, everyone can tap into the powers of God. And then as soon as she had some disciples, she was like, actually, I'm more God though than you are. And she talked about gatekeepers and calling in the celestial beings from the starship, and that's what that call reminded me of.
Wow. I have to ask, and I will get to our next call in just a second, but the organization you were referring to, did they say God or did they say higher power? I've had people call my show and they say, I know that Christianity is embedded in much of what is taught or embedded in the gears in the machine. But they also, in some ways, sort of massage it out to say higher power, and they say sort of pick something to focus on, a focal point. Did they say higher power or God, or
They
both?
say both. They say both, and you're absolutely right. You read that book, and it's very clear that the author of the book, or authors, were Christian men who had a very specific paradigm. What I think is amazing about the book is it was written in the 1930s, and in the 1950s, there was a prominent atheist member of the organization who said, "You guys need to revise the language in this book to be open to atheistic approaches to this concept that you're trying to get people to be open to, or this will have a very limited use for people." And remarkably, I think they were open to it. They were open to start incorporating language that's very specific, that every time God is mentioned, it always says God as you understand. And they use a gendered pronoun here, which I don't like. They say God as you understand him. And in the 21st century, a lot of people say God as you understand God, and they'll replace the pronoun. But, like, as I like to say with people that I'm working with who are newcomers, I go, it's kind of crazy that the book is as progressive as it is. We're lucky that the book doesn't like say a bunch of slurs in it, but because of the era in which it was written, I think it's pretty amazing that they leave in the language that's like, well, we obviously have our frame of reference for what that word means, but the language is specifically saying, don't take ours as doctrine or scripture. You're free to have your own, and that includes atheistic approaches, agnostic approaches, secular approaches of all kinds. And like I said, in 8 years, no one's ever challenged me on this. I've never had anybody say, you're no longer welcome here, you're no longer allowed to read our book or do our steps. And
Well, I've had people call my show and they talk about how this organization actually helped them to beat addiction. And I would never be the person to say that program sucks or, whatever. I mean, I don't go as hard as some would like, because if the ritual or structure of it in some way helped you to escape addiction, I think that escape right now is my number one conversation that I'm going to have. But I think one of the problems that I do have is what I'm understanding to be a reliance on a higher power, or you're focused on an outside element, right? You have to look from without, when I think actually beating addiction comes from within, right? Do you cheat yourself? But with all this talk about a higher power assisting you whenever the power to beat it may come from within?
Yeah, I think the door is absolutely left open to that. I think there are definitely people who practice a program, and I hear it all the time, where they're like, none of this comes from me. This is all God. Like, the only reason why I'm here is God. Like, I couldn't do any of this. And I don't buy into that at all. I always talk, my thought and my sort of respectful approach to those people is like, hey, whatever works for you, whatever keeps you sober, whatever is your deal. But my deal is like, you have to be the person who gets in the car, puts the keys in the ignition, and drives to the meeting. You can't just say, God, get me to, one of these rooms. You've got to be the person who picks up the phone. There's got to be. And so I'm always talking with newcomers about that, about the fact that it's like, hey, there's something in you that wants this bad enough that you're willing to be open to a new way of approaching this problem. And, for me, it was a situation where, like, it was the last place I wanted to be. So, especially coming from Mormonism and coming from a religious background. And I also know, I mean, I'd been in atheist circles and listening to atheist podcasts for 11 years. And I was well aware that my atheist fellows, of their feelings about this organization, that they were like, no, that organization is a bad organization. They're a bunch of bad people. And I went there, and all I was ever really asked to do was just to be open to it. And like from day one, I was telling everyone, I don't know if this is for me. I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God. I don't pray. And everyone just kept saying, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Just, can you come here tomorrow? And I was like, yeah, I guess. But did you hear what I just said? I'm an atheist. I don't believe. And they were like, yeah, that's fine. They're just like, just don't worry about that, you know? And here we are 8 years later, and I still feel very comfortable telling people that I'm an atheist and telling people that I have my own approach to it. I believe that, again, when it says of your own understanding, that I get to say, to me, because I think it's both. When you ask, is the solution externalized or internalized? And I think it's both, right? Like where what I'm saying is I want to be open to the help of other people who have walked this path before me and say, I can't seem to get a handle on this thing. You seem to be able to get a handle on it. What did you do? And then I just do what those people tell me they did. And I'm open to those concepts because the concepts I'm using aren't working. And that seems to help. So there's sort of this externalized system of other people helping you. But then there's also this, what you discover through the process is it is an internal process of change. It's an internal shifting and a psychic shift that happens of like, oh, I need to re-examine how I'm dealing with my existential issues of it, being alive. I was using drugs and alcohol to numb the pain, the day-to-day pain of existence. And now I need to figure out some other modality of getting outside of that pain. And one of them that's very useful to me is finding ways to be of service and getting outside. It's kind of like, like the program that I practice personally is in my head, and I always tell this to anyone who's interested, is a pragmatic one. It's not a magical one. It's not a supernatural one. It's pragmatic. Everything that I've been told to do since day one is just stuff that's like, oh, that makes sense in a practical way, in a real world way. If I'm here working with newcomers or taking on service commitments, and instead of being down at the bar getting loaded or at the liquor store, I'm likely to get another 24 hours. It's just a pragmatic approach. But to some people, yeah, it is this kind of like supernatural miracle that has taken place. And I don't subscribe to that, and I don't preach that. And as far as I can tell, at nearly a decade in, nobody cares that that's my approach to it. But
it's interesting just to riff on what you have said.
Mhm.
When someone talks about, well, God got me through this and God helped me through that. One thing I try to do is to, and again, you've already said this, I know I'm being a little redundant, but hey, don't forget to give yourself a little credit. You're the one who, brought yourself. You're the one who, you didn't have to make this call. You didn't have to make this choice. You didn't have to leave this job. You didn't have to end this abusive relationship, but you did. And so whatever else is happening, don't shortchange yourself, because the choice that you made is remarkable. And I don't think that cheats them of a God belief, but I think it maybe plants the seed of not dismissing their own internal machine, their own internal agency, which has merit and great value. And I that has been effective for me. I don't know. It's interesting. I think we take a softer approach to this organization than some. I'm still pissed at them for a lot of stuff, but I mean, you get it. I see 1, 2 more on the switchboard. So let's knock these out. And I'm checking my radar here. Go ahead. Were you going to say something else? I've got a big glob of red, purple, and flashing things heading my direction. So
I'm ready to go. Let's rock and roll.
Oh, okay. All right, let's do it. Who called first? About the same. We'll start with Tom. Is it Tom out of Michigan?
Yeah, Tom, Michigan. Yep.
Welcome, Tom. I see you've dialed in a few times before. You are a theist. What do you want to talk about?
Well, I watch you guys, and I've been watching atheist stuff here for a little while, for whatever reason.
Speak up for me.
I said I've been watching atheist stuff. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think so. Go ahead.
Okay. But I've been watching atheist stuff for a little while, for whatever reason. And, you guys seem like you can...
Tom, we can't hear you. You gotta speak up.
Okay. Can you hear me?
When you say "Can you hear me?" we can, but then when you speak, it sounds like you walk away from the microphone like this. So
Okay, well, I'll
just
talk.
keep your voice up while you're talking, please.
Okay. Well, you guys seem like you guys have turned into atheists, kind of gradually, but for some people, it's hard to do that. And I just wondered if you could give some advice for some people that have a hard time becoming atheists.
Wait, hang on. Are you a theist?
Yes.
You're asking us to provide steps for someone to become an atheist?
Yeah, I mean, for some people, it's hard to become an atheist because let's just say someone, for an example, can I put an example out there for you?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, let's say for an example, someone, when he was very young, was maybe like, this might sound a little out of the world here a little bit, but was put under a spell and their mind might have been like controlled by a supernatural power sort of thing. And it was kind of documented through medical because their mind was kind of influenced like by a virus, let's say, and for a few years. And then when the person came out of it, let's say, after a few years, when he came out of it, he actually seen miracles from, like, say, a supernatural being. And because he's seen the miracles, there's no way that person can ever become an atheist because miracles were shown to him. How could a person like that ever become an atheist?
Do you want to just drop the example and just tell us what miracles you saw, Tom? Because you're obviously talking about yourself. So I would love to just
Well, I
know,
don't wanna,
if you could just, I know that you're going to say like, oh, it's too personal, but like, like that's what we're here to do. Would you mind telling us what miracles were shown to you that you have a hard time letting go of?
well, let's say, love. I know you've probably all felt love. But there's actually a...
Come on, you got to do better than that, Tom. What miracles were you shown that you cannot let go of? That
Yeah, you didn't let me finish. But there's actually a chemical composition of love that you can't see. But if God showed you the chemical composition of love, he actually showed it to you.
are you saying
And
that
there's
that's
no
what
other
happened?
way. Yes, there's no other way to see the chemical composition of love unless God showed it to you.
What were the
And
exact
for some who
circumstances? Tom, can you take me through the story of when God showed you the chemical composition of love? Walk me through what happened exactly.
Okay, I was actually at work, and like I said, I was
Okay.
feeling very good. But when I looked over at a mother and a child, I could see the composition of love between the mother and the child in a chemical way where you could actually see the composition of love. And the only way you could actually see that composition of love is if some supernatural being showed it to you. You can't
It's
see a
the only
composition. You can't see the
It's the
composition.
only way. It's the only way.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you can't see it under a microscope. You can't see it any other way.
But there's
But if
no
God
other
showed you,
explanations for that. There's no other explanations for that you can think of, Tom?
I don't know.
You want to venture a guess, Seth?
I want to know what the chemical composition of love is. What are these ingredients?
Well, yeah, I don't know that. I wish you would have gave me. I wish you would have gave me.
Well, if you don't know what it is, why are you calling to defend it?
Well, my purpose of the call was if somebody, and there's other miracles that people see, this is a miraculous life we live. There's other miracles.
Hang on, hold on. No, you and I are going to stand apart on this. If someone loves someone else, and we can get into the various incarnations and definitions of love, whether it's a platonic love or a romantic love or any number of different variations. How is that necessarily a miracle, which would imply a supernatural agent? Why would love simply not be love, commitments, affection, a familial tie or a relational tie? Why would it have to be a miracle?
Because you could see the physical composition of love. That makes
What's the physical
miracle.
composition?
Well, it was kind of a clear, watery. thought you
Tom,
were local. Yeah. I thought you were local.
He's fucking with us. That's what's happening.
Tom, what are you talking about, dude?
He is definitely vibrating at the highest level.
Yeah.
No, you can see the physical
He is
composition of
heading.
love.
He is rapidly vibrating toward his happy ending. That's all I'm saying, Boston.
So
all
this
I'm
is what
saying.
I'll say. This is what I'll say, Tom, is I think in certain like you're asking us, you're saying how can someone be an atheist when they've been shown certain, like, you know, how can you help someone be an atheist? And I think that there are, I've talked about this a lot on my own podcast and on this show. The interplay between mental illness and theology is seen everywhere, and I don't think there's anything I can do to help a person who is claiming to see things that aren't there and says that the only explanation for those things is a higher, you know, supernatural being must be showing it to them. Like, there are so many explanations, Tom. You could be having a stroke. You could be just losing your grip on objective reality. You could be, someone could have dosed you with LSD. You could, I mean, there's just so many plausible explanations outside of the only possible explanation is there is a God. But if you are determined to believe that the only possible explanation is there's a God, then there's nothing we can do on this show to help you. If you're determined to believe that you see the physical composition of love when you watch two people in love and that that's coming from God, I can't say no, you don't. I can't say like, you know, like, you're talking about seeing stuff that's not there, my guy. And I would say go talk to a psychiatrist, go talk to somebody who can maybe help get you on some meds, or I don't know.
Well, you know, my point wasn't really, but for other people who have, like I said, the world's a miraculous place. Other people see miracle-like things, so they're never going to become an atheist either. So
You don't. How do you know that? How do you know that?
Yeah, I asked you to give me some examples of miracles, and so far the miracles have been like,
Well,
what are you talking about?
Well, for example, you know, my dad was diagnosed with brain cancer, and they gave him 6 months to live. And I'm not using this as my belief, but he ended up living 12 years.
Okay.
For someone else who lived through that, they would say, hey, well, that was miraculous. And they're always going to believe, you know, God.
You don't know that.
Yeah,
I know, but they're always going to believe that. But people are always going to believe that.
Wait, I just told you, Tom, you do not know what they will or will not always believe. You do not know what their processes are.
Okay.
You don't know what experiences they will have. You don't know what data or information they will encounter. You have no idea what their next months, years, decade.
Right, but for a lot of people,
a lot of people may not change their mind is not an argument for or against anything, Tom. And whatever watery substance that they might encounter along the way, we're going to need more than this to as a determiner as to whether or not they will remain atheists. Look, help you understand how someone can become an atheist. There's a planet of 8 billion people. Everybody's on an individual journey. Their personalities, their life circumstances are so monumentally unique, monumentally complex and detailed. There's no one way that anyone gets to any one destination. Ultimately, if it's true, we want to believe it. If it's not, we don't. And if we don't know, we say we don't know, which takes us back to a point we made about an hour ago. Anything else you want to mention, Tom, before we move on?
No, I guess if that's all you got.
Lucky us.
Yeah, that's all we got. Yeah.
Have a wonderful day. Michigan is a better place for having you in it, Tom.
I talked to Tom a few weeks ago on another show, and it was the same deal like that. I love he always responds like this. He always goes, "Oh, well, I don't know. Well, who knows?" You know, on the other line. Yeah,
he's just jacking with us, right? I mean, does he just want to hear his voice on the show? I mean,
I don't know.
It's a watery. It's wet. I'm sorry. The composition of the miracle is wet. Did he say is it milky? Is it viscous? I don't understand. What does the miracle, the composition of the miracle look like? You know,
What I'm
and
in,
I will say there is utility in what just happened. It wasn't a total waste because it gives us an opportunity, as thunder claps above me. Um, it gives us an opportunity to knock down one of the sort of lazy, hazy apologetics that comes our way, that you can't properly love without the idea of a deity, or you can't know goodness or those types of things without a God, which I think is rather insulting.
well, it goes
We
back to your
can,
thing of, giving yourself credit.
I think, too. Why would goodness? Why would pro-social behaviors? Why would being an ethical or charitable person be or require in any way an agent from outside, especially a specific deity with a proper name? It just makes no sense to me when we realize, if you look at it evolutionarily, and some people are like, well, how could ethics have evolved? How could pro-social behaviors have evolved? And I'm like, how could they not have evolved? Right? If we had all been every person for itself, every primate for itself, how long would we really have survived? We see binding agents throughout history. We see that acting for the benefit of another may actually come back to benefit us. Is there true altruism? I don't know, but it's still pro-social behavior. No religion required. And the beautiful stuff in this life, religions love to say they own it. Oh, if it's love and it's family and it's joy and it's all these good things, well, that's religion. That's our specific faith. Everything that's awful, that's either a false faith or those evil atheists. And I find that monumentally convenient for them, right? They grab all the good and say everything bad belongs to the others. When the truth is, these aren't religious things. The goodness is a human thing. And I think giving ourselves and others credit for that is really a beautiful thing in itself.
I agree. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I was also
Okay.
just, what I'm looking for when I talk to someone like Tom is like, like in the Book of Mormon, the book that I was raised on, they have the bad characters are these guys named Laman and Lemuel. And it's the most implausible thing because he's talking about like, well, what about a person who's seen real life miracles? How can they believe? Laman and Lemuel are these two guys who they refuse to believe in God or in anything, even though multiple times in their lives angels come and like rebuke them. And it's a thing where it's like there are multiple witnesses, so this is not just one person's delusion of a watery substance coming between two people. Like it's they're in a crowd of people, and the whole crowd sees an angel that appears, that materializes out of thin air, rebukes them and says, leave your brother alone. Your brother is called of God to be your leader. And then they still are like, nah, fuck that. And I'm like, okay, cool. That's what I'm looking for. Is like, tell me a story about when you and all your friends, when you were 15, saw an angel and you all saw it. Like it was undeniable. It wasn't just you. It wasn't just you weren't on drugs. It wasn't multiple people saw it. People got it on video. Give me some. Anytime people are claiming that they've experienced something supernatural, it's like that's why skeptic shows like this exist. Is we're just like, hey, just give me something solid.
Yeah.
Give me something ironclad here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The chemical nature of love is a watery thing. This makes me a little uncomfortable. It's like an improper use of the word moist. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that. Thank you for introducing that to me, Tom. Now I'm squirming a little bit in my chair. I'm not sure what to do with this information. All right, let's see. This one's from my area code, but it says it's a call out of Pennsylvania. Watcher 215. Watcher, is that what we call you?
Yes. Hello, Seth. How are you?
I
Can you hear me?
am incredibly good, actually, considering I'm about to be struck by lightning as the gods unleash their wrath above me, the godless mortal below. What's on your mind? You're on the air with Austin and myself.
No, I just got love for you. Austin, right? The other guy's name's Austin.
The other guy is Austin. Yeah.
Hey, man, I was glad to hear. I heard that when you were younger, you worked in the hospice care, And I didn't know that about you. I heard you before. I'd seen you and heard you before. I don't remember if we may have talked before. I'm not sure, but I commend you for that and your outlook on. You were sharing how you being useful and pragmatic and helping other people was a way that you kind of live your life, and I really want to commend you for that because, yes, Seth, I worked at the John 3:16 mission in Tulsa for like 10 years. So that's
Wow.
where I would hear you on the air, your golden voice on the airwaves. And that's kind of my relationship with you. You were kind of like part of the background of my life for a good portion of my life while I was
This
in
must have been
Tulsa.
in the 1990s when I was a Christian radio host.
Exactly, KXOJ, when you're on
Yeah.
KXOJ.
Yeah. We played Amy Grant, Stephen Curtis Chapman, Michael W. Smith, Whiteheart, Third Day, etc.
Do you ever revisit any of those? I mean, in your atheist life now, do you ever listen to any of that music anymore now?
I don't. I don't seek out Christian music. I don't enjoy Christian music in that way, with the exception of maybe a few Christmas carols. I've separated the mythology from them, and I just enjoy sort of the spirit of the song, if you will. But it's hard for me to go back and really enjoy Christian music because I saw how much of the industry was a business. I saw how many of the artists, and many were wonderful and sincere believers who wanted to do good things, and they deserve full credit, But there were others who were just business people, or they were all burnouts, and I'm fully aware that the Christianity that those songs are selling is debunked mythology, often very damaging mythology, and it's how do I enjoy that? How do I listen to that? But are there tunes that come on that take me back to a certain memory or a time in my life? I mean, if Petra's Not of This World album came on and they played, I'd probably listen to the whole damn thing, just because it recalls a certain moment in my life. It's a nostalgic exercise. I don't know. But no, I don't seek out Christian music at all.
Yeah, I feel the same way about that album as well, and I revisit it quite often. How about did you have any interaction with John 3:16 Mission with their outreach in Tulsa? I can't remember. I don't remember you ever visiting the mission.
No, we didn't. I didn't have any direct interaction with the mission. No, you took in what people who were homeless or disadvantaged, gave them shelter, food, etc.?
Correct. Yeah, that's what we did. And
when people came in to receive shelter and food, pardon me, when people came in to receive shelter and food or whatever, was there a prerequisite that they had to listen to a sermon or something, or were they just given aid?
Yes, sir. They a half hour for like a half hour before the actual meal was served. There was usually a message given for about a half an hour.
Okay, so somebody walks in and they're hungry and they need shelter, and you're like, we'll give you food and shelter after we preach to you for 30 minutes?
Yes, sir.
Do you feel like that is a moral way to approach people in need?
Well, Christ fed people, but he also gave them his word. And later, he kind of was scolding people for chasing him for the bread as opposed to the word that he was given.
Hang on. So if someone comes in who is hungry and needs shelter, and you are essentially holding hostage the needs that they have, or a way to meet the need that they have until they listen to a 30-minute sermon, is that the moral thing to do?
Yeah, I think it is moral because we're given a priority to the words that are being given, which is feeding the spiritual needs of the inner man. And then we minister to the outer needs of the man with the
Would it not make more sense?
Given a priority.
Would it not make more sense? Would it not make more sense to feed the physical body and meet their physical need first, and then give them the option to stay voluntarily to hear whatever you had to say?
Yeah, that's another way of thinking of. I think that's a
It
natural
sure
way
is.
of.
It's another
Mhm.
way of thinking about it. Would that not be then the
Mhm.
better way, where you're not saying, I have a solution to your problem. I'm going to keep it over here until you listen to 30 minutes of whatever. Wouldn't it be better to say, welcome, you have a need. Let me meet that need. By the way, you're welcome to stay and listen to the things we have to tell you. Wouldn't that be a better way to do it?
It seems like a better way when you think about it naturally, but
Yes, it
there's
does
another
seem like a
there's
better
not
way
there's
when
more
we
than
think about it
there's more than
naturally.
there's more than one way to think about things. Like there's a natural way, and then there's also a spiritual insight as well. But many people don't have insight into the spiritual, which is why we prioritize the spiritual and try to get people to focus on the spiritual. We're not neglecting the natural, because the natural is definitely important and people are hurting. So
Austin, I'm not
it's
locking you
just a
out.
matter.
I'm almost done. Austin, I'm almost done. Forgive me.
Okay.
Oh,
Please indulge me.
I'm good. I'm good.
All right, somebody walks in. I walk in. I'm shivering.
Hmm.
I'm
Hey,
starving.
what's up there, Seth? How you doing, Seth? I hear
I
you on the
walk
radio all
in.
the
I'm
time.
shivering and starving. I have
Let
an
me see if I can
immediate
get you
need.
something to.
Some might
I'll
say
try to
I'm
get you.
suffering. Why would the immediate priority not be the immediate need? And how the hell am I supposed to focus on a message about my eternal soul if I am freezing and starving?
Okay, in that scenario you just presented, I'm almost imagining it in my mind. We in the front of the mission, we had a lot of donations that came in. A lot of times it'd be a coat or blanket. First thing I would do when you come in, is if you were shivering and starving, or like you said, is I would attend to that need that you're talking about, that immediate need that you're talking about. I'd probably give you a coat, I'd give you a blanket, I'd get you warm, and then you would go through the process, because there is a process going into the mission. Um, so, that's how I would respond to what you're presenting to me. Yeah, we do. I mean, we're not going to just, ignore somebody that has an immediate need like that. But at the same time, my point is that because we follow Christ, we're
Yeah, I
prioritizing
got it.
something that we
I'm
feel is
tracking.
very, very
It reminds me
important.
of there was a program at a church downtown. They would send a school bus around to impoverished neighborhoods. And they would say, hey,
Right?
parents, if you want to dress your kids up and put them out here at the front, our bus will pick them up. We'll take them to church. The parents said, wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
They brought the kids into the
Okay.
church and they said, over here, look, we have lunch, we have pizza, and we have candy, and we have soda.
Mm-hmm.
And you can have all this
Yeah.
delicious lunch after you
Uh-huh.
attend our 1 hour church service. And I
Right.
find this a deeply immoral thing. I think if they're hungry children,
Mm-hmm.
you feed the hungry children. Austin, would you like to jump in with anything at this time?
All I'm going to add there, Jeffrey, is that you just said it yourself. You said, because we follow Christ. You gave the answer. You said, well, we normally we
Mm-hmm.
would just attend to the most pressing need, but because we follow Christ, we prioritize the spiritual need. And that is the problem, Jeffrey, is because of your religious or spiritual convictions, you are going about the attending to people with great needs in a really predatory way and in a backwards way, in a way where it's not really about serving their needs so much as it is about gaining converts to your specific ideology. And that's a problem, because the good thing that you're trying to do has strings attached to it. The thing that you're actually trying to do is just get people to be on your ideological team and to join your ideological tribe. You're not actually just prioritizing trying to help people. You're trying to bolster your own cause. And you said it. You said it's because we follow Christ that we do it this way. And I wish that you would
Well,
do
there's
that
another
same work for
reason.
an okay.
There's
What's the
another
other reason?
reason. For 10 years, like I was telling Seth, for 10 years, I worked at that mission. And I found that not only was there a natural or outer man need, so many natural needs that we tried to minister to, but that there was also a spiritual need that these people have. That's what I observed as in my interaction with these people. And I
Okay.
realized that Christ actually had the answer in his teachings and his words were answers to many of these needs that they had. And I was
Yeah,
able
I
to
get it.
minister as I was doing one, I was prioritizing the other and not neglecting the other. I was putting them both together. I was giving value to both, but really prioritizing the spiritual part because I found that was at the root of many of the wrecked lives that we saw come through those doors for over 10 years. But I really commend you. I really was interested in what you were saying. I thought that what you said about how you live your life is very, very, I remember Jesus met one man. He said, you're very close to the kingdom of God. And I almost feel like he would say that to you just by the virtue of the fact of how you are living your life right now. And that's not to be, I'm not, you know what I'm saying? I'm giving you props and not to ingratiate myself to you, but I really recognize what you said. I had never heard, before I got on, I was kind of heard that as I was setting myself up to, with my headphones and stuff. But anyway, I love to see Seth. Every time I see Seth, I remember those days and my time back in Tulsa and that golden voice he had. I am ingratiating myself to Seth because I'm a fan of his. But anyway, all being said, I appreciate interacting with you guys on today.
Hey, I get it, Jeffrey. I think that you seem to be a person who genuinely does want to help people and genuinely does want to be of service in the world. I think that comes from a place that I believe is genuine, that it's not just a manipulative desire to exclusively get converts for your specific ideology. I would just say it sounds like your ideology is just kind of getting in the way of the purity of what it is you want to do and the kind of person you want to be. I appreciate the feedback, though, and that's my thoughts. I don't know if Seth has any other final parting thoughts.
I do not. Thanks for calling the show. We'll see you later.
All right. Shalom, fellas. Bye.
I'm just not convinced of the sincerity of this person. I don't know. I mean, I hear riffs on, well, you're such good people. You're actually better Christians than many Christians I know. I'm sure you've heard this one. For atheists, you're actually better Christians than a lot of, I hear a riff on that. But there's something performative about what we just heard that I find a little bit troubling. And you really hit it on the head. It's almost like a bait and switch. We're going to give you a goodie. Come in here. And then at a point where you may be vulnerable or in great need, we have an ulterior motive. Even if you sincerely believe, and maybe he does sincerely believe that you need to be nourished spiritually as well as physically, and perhaps the spiritual is more important. To me, that's a bait and switch. It's a kind of a shaky and dishonest tactic for trying to get your message out. And if I really gave a shit, if somebody walked in and they were shivering and starving, the first thing I do is I wrap them in as many warm blankets and coats as I can get, and I say, "Here's some hot food." That's the best thing to do. And if they stay for the sermon or not, I mean, that's far from the fore of my mind at that time. I don't know.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that even that thing of like, I think that it's like that person believes that they're being sincere when they go, I think you guys are doing good things. It sounds like I commend you for the way you're living your life. But there's also tied to that, and I think you're absolutely right about this, there's this like salesmanship thing where it's like, I want to pay you a compliment so that you'll be open to what I'm saying, which is there's also a lot of value in this spiritual message that I'm peddling. And so it's a softening technique. It's an emotionally manipulative technique, even if there is some sincerity to it. It's, I mean, to a certain degree, it's sometimes a technique that I engage in on this side, where I try to pay a person a compliment if I like their response to, like, we were talking to a kid a couple weeks ago who he answered several questions. He said, "You know what? I don't know the answer to that question, and I'll think more about that." And I said, "That's a really good answer to that question." Said, I really appreciate your honesty. And sometimes, and I'm being sincere, I really do appreciate the honesty. And also, I'm trying to like lower that person's defenses and be like, hey, good on you for being willing to say you don't know the answer to a question. And that's what I get a little bit from that is like, let me lower your defenses by complimenting you on how good of a job you're doing and what a good person you are. And now let me tell you what value there is in the gospel of Jesus Christ. And yeah, so it's not 100% sincere. It's not, yeah.
I also hear a shade. It's funny. I had a guy, and he's just the nicest dude. He lived in my neighborhood. He was a lovely person. He was a worship pastor, and I mean, he was hardcore. The guy was just freaking hardcore. But he just loved Natalie and me, and we loved him and his family, and we'd check on each other's houses when we were traveling, and we always checked on each other if they needed anything, whatever. But there was he offered to drive me to the airport when I was going to speak at an atheist conference. He was just one of these guys, and I couldn't escape the feeling that he was like the cool Christian who surrounded himself with atheists. It's almost like when you are around somebody who is a person of white privilege and they say, well, I've got a black friend. So I've just caught a little bit of that. Like, I'm such a hip Christian that I'm surrounded by people of different beliefs, including those who don't even believe in God. And I'm just loving unconditionally and that kind of thing. And I almost felt like I was a notch in his belt in a way. And I don't know if I was or not. I really took him at face value, but under the surface, I thought, well, is there a shade to that kind of thing where it's like, hey man, you atheist, we're all hanging together. Maybe that makes me a cooler Christian. I could be projecting, or that could be supposition. I don't know.
Yeah, totally. And I could be projecting too, but when I was an active Christian, I lived that way. And the last talk I ever gave in my church growing up was, I mean, I loved speaking in church. I'm a yapper. I'm a born yapper, and I loved any opportunity to get in front of my community and speak. But I gave this talk about all of my different friends who were struggling with different things, and my friends who were atheists and my friends who were drug addicts and things like that. And then I kind of like admonished the congregation, my ward. I was like, and I bet all of you have some opinions in your head about me right now because I just said I told you about who my friends are. And I was like, but that's the problem with this church is we need to be willing to befriend people who don't think like us. How else are we supposed to bring people to the message? And so I was admonishing them and kind of gloating about how I had this very worldly, diverse group of friends, but still the goal in me having that diverse group of friends was, this is our best chance to bring these people into the fold, is we need to be willing to be open to at least feigning friendship with them. And I actually had to apologize to a lot of my friends after I left the church and kind of come to an understanding that there were many aspects of my friendship with them that were not genuine and not sincere, that I was sort of playing this long game of trying to slowly get them over to my side rather than just accepting them as they are. So,
well, I think I'm not saying that every Christian or a religious person who sincerely befriends non-believers has an angle, or they're trying to be super hip. I mean, I think a lot of people, I think a lot of Christians, they've X'd out all the stuff in the Christianity and the Bible, et cetera, and the dogmas that they're uncomfortable with, and they kind of made their own religion in their image. And they may call it Christianity. It's a relationship with Jesus. Jesus loves everybody, and they sincerely do want to love everybody in this world. Hell, I'm allies in the fight for state church separation out there with some people who are Christians. We disagree on theology, but I don't see their friendship or acceptance as part of they're not being coy, or they're not being superior, or they're not trying to be super hip. They just love people, and they don't care who those people are. I mean, those people exist. I don't want to shortchange them, but you're right. It's almost like I'm building my own relational equity as a better believer, as a better, more Christ-like Christian by my acceptance of the worldly and then I can broadcast that to the masses. I find that interesting. Since we have a second, I see the lines are closed. How did you bust out? You said you were a Mormon, and I have to find out, what were the straws that broke that camel's back? What happened to you?
One of our callers earlier today said, you guys have become atheists, and I'm sure that was a gradual process. It wasn't really a gradual process for me. It was sort of like you mentioned earlier to a caller, hey, if there's ever a question that somebody tells you shouldn't ask, or a line of inquiry that you shouldn't explore, put that one at the top of the priority list. Growing up Mormon, we are told very specifically that there is certain literature, certain people, certain philosophers, certain ideas that just should not be considered, that are just dangerous. And you sort of learn to accept the idea that it's okay to just steer clear of certain ideas and certain lines of inquiry. But it was just honestly it was once I allowed myself to be willing to explore certain questions. And what it was, funny enough, was I was about to go on my mission. I was about to go do the 2-year mission thing and try to sell this church to people. And I had a roommate in college who I was like working on. It was kind of like my pre-mission training. I was like, I'm going to like work on this guy and see if I can like preach the gospel to this guy. And he asked me one night, he was older than me. He was a couple years older than me. And he was like, just curious. He's like, you're about to go try to sell this thing, right? For like 2 years. And I was like, yeah, I don't really think of it as selling. I'm just trying to go out and help people. And he was like, cool. Have you ever done anything else? Have you ever lived any other way? Have you been Mormon your whole life? And I was like, I was born and raised like this. And he was like, cool. So what makes you so confident that you can say from personal experience that the way you're living your life is the best possible way for anyone to live their life? I mean, you're selling people this idea that like you've got it, that you've got the best possible situation for, going through life here. And this is the only thing you've ever done. And I kind of took that question. I was like, damn, he's right. And so in an attempt to be a better missionary, I made a conscious choice that I was going to start trying to examine some of these ideas and questions that I had never allowed myself to examine before. And I fully believed at the time that it was only going to strengthen my faith and strengthen my resolve and strengthen my testimony, that I was going to actually examine these scary things, and that I was going to find, by being brave and approaching these scary questions, like, what happens if I don't go to church every week? What happens if I try alcohol? If I try drugs? What happens if I go a little further with the girl that I'm dating than they say I'm allowed? Simple things like that. And I thought, what's going to happen is I'm going to fall flat on my face. My life is going to fall into ruin, and it's going to be proof that the true, of the true might and the truth of the Mormon Church. And that's not what happened. I left and I started experimenting with these different things, and I didn't immediately, I wasn't immediately covered in darkness. And once I was doing those things, I was able to just start asking myself questions that I'd never dared to ask, like, is it possible that Joseph Smith was just a liar? And those are the real questions. It's like, that's the stuff that you really don't want to approach. And once you just ask yourself, like, is it possible that he just made that up? And then when you really start allowing yourself to just think that simple thought, it's like, oh, not only is it possible, it's the much, much, much more likely explanation that he just was a charlatan and he's just a con man. And that actually makes way more sense than the story that he's telling. And once you pull that pin out from, you pull that card out from the house of cards, it comes down immediately. And there's no putting it back. Like, you really can't. It's kind of like you said earlier, you're like, oh, I didn't really make a choice. It's like, once you kind of remove that thing and it falls down, you can't remake it. You can't put it. It's like, oh, well, there that goes, and I can't unsee it. I can't unsee the reality that, like, oh, this guy is functionally no different than any other cult member. He's doing the exact same thing. He's following the exact same playbook. It's in the end of the day, it's about like sex and control, which it normally is for especially male cult members. Is like they just want people to have sex with them, and that happens all the time. There's always some doctrine about like why I need to be allowed to have sex with all the women in the harem, and that was Joseph Smith's thing. And it's just like, oh, it's nothing really unique about it, nothing really special about it, just a dime a dozen cult, you know.
You know, when I was in the faith, it was really a rigged game. Because, first of all, they beat you down and say because you're born with a sin nature, you really don't have the authority to challenge God, right? So that's one roadblock. But the other one is that they'll send you out and say, "Well, ask God to prove Himself, test God, read the Scriptures, tap on the glass." But the thing was, if we came back with any answer that wasn't Jesus, we either did it wrong, or it was a lack of faith, or we were being deceived by the devil, or whatever. And then they would send us back out and say, "Go ask again." And then we came back and go ask again. And they would do so until we came back and said that the answer is Jesus. It was a totally rigged game. And I think for me in my 30s, I finally gave myself permission to be uncomfortable. I was made uncomfortable. I saw and heard some stuff that made me squirm a little bit in my chair. Thank you, Christopher Hitchens, for that. And then I finally thought, well, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to give myself the authority, the permission to follow this trail of breadcrumbs and see where it leads and where it doesn't lead. And, people have asked if I'd ever go back to the safe cocoon of religion. I don't think it's a safe cocoon. I think it was a limiting, suffocating place. I'm so much happier and comfortable in my own skin these days. I'm sure you feel the same, right? So whatever pill you would take to go back to the Matrix, you would not take that pill. Is that to be understood?
I don't think I can, is the thing. But you're I guess you're asking a hypothetical. If I could, if there was some way to reinsert my brain, I would not go back. Yeah. Correct. And one of the things that, funny enough about like sobriety, we talked about a lot about on this show, is I was told by my leaders growing up, if you don't bother experimenting with drugs and alcohol, because you never know if you're going to be one of those people who your life is ruined and you're an addict and you wind up destitute and you're in rehab. So like, it's just better not to even find out. And one of the hardest parts about getting sober to me was like admitting that they were kind of right about that. I was like, damn it. I hate that like my Mormon leaders growing up were in a roundabout way right about me and substances. They weren't right that, that like the devil was in the drugs, but they were right that I did have a problem with, with control when it came to substances, and that sucked. But where they were wrong was they always said, and you'll wind up back here anyway. You'll wind up coming back to the church on your hands and knees. And it's like the one thing I'm like, no, you guys were totally wrong about that. I didn't go, shit, I need to get sober. I guess that means Joseph Smith was actually telling the truth. I just went, damn it. I guess there's some truth to the fact that like some of these substances can be hard to get a handle on and can kind of wreak havoc on your life. But that doesn't mean that Mormonism is true. And I still would not go back and reinsert myself. I'm even grateful for the years that I spent in active addiction. I had a friend once apologize to me for that. A friend who I took my first drink with. He was like, "I'm so sorry that I got you started on that." And I said, "Oh, dude, I don't regret it. I like that I have the experience with drugs and alcohol that I have. I like that I know what it's like to be on all the different drugs that I know what it's like to be on. I don't begrudge those experiences, and I wouldn't take them back."
Well, it also allows you to speak with some equity to the subject of addiction, just like you're able to speak with equity about the Mormon faith and cults and religion as a whole. And I think that's terrific. It's been a real honor being able to hang out with you for 2.5 hours. Maybe we'll get a chance to brush elbows out on the road somewhere. And, I don't know what I'm buying, but I'll buy, and we'll get to know each other a little better. But you're the real thing. I really enjoyed hanging out. So thanks, brother.
Really great getting to know you, Seth. This was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thanks to Arden, thanks to Stephanie, thanks to our callers, thanks to everybody who puts this show together. I hope that this evening, as you continue forth, you vibrate in the positive. High vibrations tonight. See you later.